We've got an article here by Polygon that states Hasbro execs says to expect what's next for Baldur's Gate in really short order. Anybody out there that spent any amount of time in the world of role-playing games, you probably have heard of Baldur's Gate 3 as one of the biggest games in recent memory. What you haven't heard is any news about the game or the studio, and for most of the community, they've interpreted that as the developers being hard at work at Baldur's Gate 4, or perhaps just twiddling their thumbs while sitting on their pile of money. Thank goodness a Hasbro exec came out here to say that they are working on something. He conveniently failed to mention what it was, but hey, something. I mean, we're not in a hurry. Dan Ayab, Senior Vice President of Digital Games at Hasbro, said, we're going to have a very measured approach. We've got a lot of plans and a lot of different ways to go about it. We're starting to think about, we're ready to start dipping toes a little bit and talking about a few things. And I think in really short order, and not to over tease the point, we're going to have some other things to talk about around that. This is a very, we are doing things behind this curtain, but please do not peek behind the curtain type approach. And it's the ideal thing that investors just really eat up. So this executive more than likely had an investor meeting in this last tax season that just wrapped up. And they all asked, hey, what's up? What y'all doing? And they said, oh yeah, we're definitely doing something. And we're gonna make a public interview with IGN where we will tell them how much something we are doing. There were rumors that Wizards of the Coast was working on like a realistic tabletop video game, but when you're laying off 90% of your team working on the project, it's probably not very indicative that the project is going very well. So that's most likely why this Ayub person is coming out here making announcements about big things going on. So, and like, we got a lot of cool projects working on. We're doing a lot of things. Please do not pay any attention to us firing 30 people. They're unrelated to the other big things we totally got going on. Yep. I'm never one to shy down from a challenge, Ayub said. Yeah, the challenges of balancing your stock portfolio because you're an executive, and developers love to have a high bar to go after. I think we've really seen the team push some really interesting ideas, and they're like, okay, we need to raise the bar, we need to go bigger, and things like that. So I think that's our hope, right? We should keep raising the bar, and everyone just tries to go a little bit higher. So that right there is a corporatized speak for we are not hitting our internal development metrics on whatever project we're currently working on. This announcement feels like a real big nothing burger, but considering that Larian already stated that they were kind of moving away from Baldur's Gate, I'm not really that worried about it because this was to be expected. We're going to take a step back from this big thing we made and go work on another big thing. I'm sure whatever they're working on now will be just as good. You know, fingers crossed. Let's be optimistic. I'm sure whatever they're working on now will be just as good as Baldur's Gate 3, but it won't be happening anytime soon, no matter what these Hasbro executives want to tell us. So are we finally getting a Baldur's Gate 4? Absolutely not. Not a direct sequel to Baldur's Gate anytime soon. Like maybe some extra merchandise, maybe a Baldur's Gate Monopoly game. Anyone want to play Baldur's Gate Monopoly? Maybe some downloadable content, maybe even a spin-off game, but a proper sequel to Baldur's Gate won't be around for a long time. What exactly did the Hasbro exec say about what's coming out? He mentioned a whole lot of nothing. This announcement served one purpose, and that was to appease investors. I guarantee you that was the sequence of events. So he's had an investors meeting, he didn't have a lot to offer them, and so he immediately went to the press to talk about all the big things that are going on, so then he can take that back to the next meeting and talk about and brag about how he's bragging about all the things that are possibly happening. Does this mean Dungeons & Dragons is getting a whole new game? They're probably working on something for the Dungeons & Dragons franchise. But considering Wizards of the Coast is laying off a whole bunch of staff, probably means the development's not going super well. Is this an official announcement or just another rumor? Well, it's more of like an official rumor because this Dan Ayab, he is an executive, a senior vice president at Hasbro, or vice president of digital games at Hasbro. So he's in a position to make official statements like this. However, he's not stating a whole lot. Like, this is just the corporate equivalent of like wiggling the mouse on your desk just so your computer doesn't go into sleep mode. Like, No work is actually being put out. We're not really doing anything besides keeping the lights on. What does this mean for longtime fans of Baldur's Gate? Well, it means that, you know, Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast, they are keeping the gamers in mind. Like Baldur's Gate 3 taught them that there is money in the gaming industry, like video games, not just the tabletops and like other media. And so that they know that if they invest in that, they can see a return on that investment. Does that mean that they're going to put out a Baldur's Gate 3 competitor or some other Dungeons and Dragons like equivalent? Who's to say? I don't want to be too enthusiastic, but I also, you know, don't want to be too critical because, yeah, who knows? They could release the next Baldur's Gate 3 and it's just a Dungeons and Dragons like dedicated game, or they could absolutely accomplish nothing at all. Because like the Neverwinter series and Baldur's Gate are all like Dungeons and Dragons adjacent. And so if Hasbro or Wizards of the Coast were to put out a proper Dungeons and Dragons game, I think there is precedent there for interest, you know, people to be interested in something like that. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be good, and it doesn't mean it will be successful, but it will generate some amount of interest. Like not having another video game in development would be kind of foolish. And it sounds like, according to this executive, yes, there is absolutely something being worked on, and that's about it. Great things are being worked on. What they are, who knows? But if you are an investor, you need to keep investing. That's what really matters. Do we have any idea when this new project might launch? Well, there's no specific release date, obviously. They haven't even really said what it is they're working on, so we definitely don't have a release date. But I would suspect no later than like Christmas time, they would put some kind of announcement out. There's going to be like reward shows, there's going to be special events, and so they have a lot of time to build up for further announcements. And maybe this Vice President Dan Ayub is actually doing us a favor, because him saying something may kick the hornet's nest a little bit and get some of the other developers to buzz on about what they're actually working on. I swear to God, if it's just like a Dungeons and Dragons mobile game, I'm gonna be so butthurt. Is it common for companies to use this tactic of dropping vague teases to build up hype? Yeah, it's incredibly common. But usually they hype up specific projects. So like the developers of Halo back in the day were talking about developing the Halo games, and the developers of Grand Theft Auto, they might come out and leak or talk about the development of Grand Theft Auto. There was nothing specific mentioned. So Mr. Executive either doesn't actually know what the team's working on, which I doubt, but it's a possibility, or they didn't hit their development metrics and he has nothing to go off of. So he knows what they should be working on, they just haven't done it yet. He may have come out and put a bunch of words together that don't really mean anything, but that's still better than actually saying nothing. That's really where I'm getting my idea of this smelling a whole lot like investor pressure, because who else can put pressure on an executive to go to the public and say a whole lot of nothing, other than the people that are allowing him to keep his job.